that's the point. Like the ideas doesn't matter at all. The what only matters is the execution phase.
In this episode of On The Go podcast, we are joined by Mr. Liyas Thomas. He's the creator of Hoppscotch.io. In this episode, we go through some of the challenges of open source development and different aspects of being an open source creator. So let's get started. Hi Liyas, welcome to On The Go podcast, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation and being here with me. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
I've heard about your startup and your company. So can you share a bit about the company yourself?
Yeah, sure. I actually run a company called Hoppscotch. Hoppscotch with a double P, not to confuse with the regular English word hopscotch. So Hoppscotch is basically an API development platform where most of our audience and customers are basically engineers, testers, and someone who basically writes code and make sure that the code is working properly, or the health is okay with them. And a little bit out of myself, so I started Hoppscotch just after my graduation. So it's actually a 3-year-old project. Started as an open source project, by the way. And so I'm literally pretty young for a CEO background, but again, it's something just I came to being after I built the project back in 2019.
How did you come across this idea for building such an app?
See, when I graduated back in 2019, I literally joined in a very early stage startup where I first came to know about API tools. Basically, some developer tools that you use for testing your APIs, documenting them, sharing with your friends, teammates, that kind of stuff. And all my colleagues, they were using some other tools. Most of them were using Pushman, some of them were using Curl, some of them were using Insomnia, which are some alternatives to Hopscotch, but they were never happy with their existing tools. So someone from our team, they basically suggested me to get started with Pushman app, which is again an enterprise grade app with more than I guess 20 million plus users. But at that point of time, I had a PC which couldn't afford to, possibly run another Electron app. But I, but I somehow managed to install the app. But at the end of the day, when I just started to work with it, and as soon as I tried to open the app, it crashed my system, sending me to the blue screen of death. So that was the trigger. That literally changed the way I should, look at such a tool like a developer. So no tools should slow down your app, and that was the pain point that I personally felt, which resulted in the inception of Hopscotch.
When you put it like that, it's like saying you had a pain point, that your own pain point in your workplace, and you made that into a product.
Correct.
So one thing that comes to my mind is I experienced kind of a similar case. So I'm a developer myself. In 2009 itself, when I joined my first company, so I also faced a workplace issue. So I was in operations. One of the major thing that I had to do was work with JSON files. So it was a huge files. So I had to structure it and restructure it and things like that. So what I did was I created a JSON viewer. So basically view JSON better in a better format, like structure it, etc. But I could not follow up and make it into a product. So how were you able to you faced a problem, you solved it, but how did you go from making that, okay, I now I have something, but should I make it into a product? Should I make it into a company? Like there is still a gap between making an MVP and building it into a career. So how into a company. So how did that decision came to be?
Well, that's an excellent question, and something I guess almost all the developers who are closely working with open source projects like Hopscotch, or just take any other open source project. This is literally the pain point almost all open source developers face. So I will split the answer into two. One is the philosophy behind pursuing such an app, so that in the future, maybe down the line in 1 year or 2 year or maybe in 6 months, it will actually become a product that would be used by hundreds of thousands or even millions of users. So that's the philosophical part, and there is the action part, which is basically a set of things that I personally did, which I believe resulted in in the decision which I pursued, and again which resulted in the product version of Hoppscotch. So the philosophical part is basically very simple. When I tried to solve my problem and I came up with a solution, first thing that I made sure is that I will share my work with the world. I will share my work with my colleagues. I will introduce the so-called solution, the tool, the product to my colleagues, or someone who I thought will be using within their use cases. So as soon as I tried to come up with the first MVP of Hopscotch, I shared it with my peers, and all of them were using some alternative tools. And as soon as they get a grip on the tool that I made, they started switching their tools to the initial hopscotch version. I know this sounds crazy, but everyone whom I showed the MVP of hopscotch, they literally made the switch within the first week itself. So why would they make the switch? That's the important part. So just because I tried to solve one pain point, it necessarily doesn't mean that should be the pain point faced by all the other users. So most of them were obviously having the same issues that I had. The Postman app is literally consuming lots of resources from my local machine. But for some other users, they wanted a simple solution. They wanted a boatless, essential, feature-rich solution. So that was the that was kind of like another dimension that I even realized when they started sharing their feedbacks to me. I mean, I never had anything that in my mind when I created a simple solution rather than a much more complex version of Postman. So the use cases basically changed from one user to the other, and collectively they made a list of features that they would expect from source coach, and that should differentiate the existing tool. So that's the reason why I kept on pursuing, working on Hoppscotch in the first place. And the second part is, a couple of things that I basically did, I personally did to promote the project. Out of which the first thing I did is I used to write blogs, blogs in the sense, my learnings, my experience, the tools that I work with, couple of the things that I learned on the on the development journey, that kind of stuff. It's kind of like a personal blog that I kept with myself. So I used to write blogs. I wrote a blog about the issue that I faced, the solution that I came up with, and obviously the open source project which tries to solve the issue. And that blog uh, actually went viral. Someone from the open source community read that blog. They started sharing it with their peers. Someone shared it on production. Someone shared it on hacker news, and it kind of, you know, allowed me to get the initial virality part. But that was the trigger. That was the first thing which attracted a lot of users in our early days, in our first couple of weeks. So these two things, I mean, except from writing a blog, I again did couple of things, out of which most relevant ones are sharing it with my peers, sharing in social media sites like Reddit, sharing the project in developer forums like Dev2, Hashnode, that kind of stuff. So I would say the mix of action plus the the philosophical part of maintaining a project is the reason why I made the switch from building a project to a product.
Yeah, so you mentioned multiple things here. First one of it being kind of saying like it's important to build in public rather than like in case of any developer. Um, when we enter our own space in our world of computers, we are totally immersed in that, and we do not like maybe share, maybe because of imposter syndrome or something like that. So people are not aware of what you're doing.
Right.
So I think that's a great point. So how important, like to emphasize on that point itself, how important do you think is for a developer or for a creator of any sort to actually share what they're learning, even if it's not even building a big project, share what they're learning in social or anywhere on online media.
See, I could not stress this more enough. So, from day one onwards, most of the features or bug fixes or anything related to the project, Hoppscotch has been contributed by the community. I must say that open source projects are literally the examples of building a project in public. So as I said, most of the features has been coined by the community. Where from the first week of launching the project in GitHub, I started getting a lot of queries in the sense, uh, bug fixes, feature requests, support tickets, all of them, just because of I started sharing the development journey with the public. So I could not stress this enough. If you are an open source enthusiast, do share your thoughts in any way possible, either in a blog or in your Twitter threads, as a YouTube channel, or any way possible. And at the end of the day, it will give you a compound effect as you grow. Like, you could not expect a drastic change in a week or a month, but by the end of an year, you will get a lots of inputs to the work that you're doing, and that compound effect is gonna again compound into a bigger result. So yes, that's definitely a big good thing.
Did you ever feel that what you are trying to say or what you are like building in public has already been said in public? For example, when you are creating something, you may be referring to a YouTube video or a blog post to learn that and do it yourself, right?
Right.
So that's one of the bottlenecks that, like, I think a lot of people face, where they feel like it's already out there. Why should I mean, create and say it once more? So yeah, what's your thought on that?
See, I guess this is kind of like a non-fact in the tech industry. I mean, the ideas basically worth nothing when you compare the execution of that particular idea. I mean, it's an obvious fact. Like, there are lots of apps which do the same exact thing, but we only use a handful of them. I mean, if you take Uber for example, there is like more than 1,000 plus apps which literally do the same thing what Uber does. If you take Zomato or Swiggy, or just take any topic, you just take any category that you can find in the software space, and you can obviously find hundreds or even thousands of softwares or apps which literally does the same exact thing. So that's the point. Like, the ideas doesn't matter at all. The I mean, what only matters is the execution phase. How well you execute is literally the game changer. So in terms of hopscotch, I can resonate a lot of things. When we were building the initial version of Hoppscotch, I was very keen on one thing, which is the app should not be a electron vapor, or something that you can install in your machine that would consume your resources, and by the end of the day it will become sluggish, it will become bloated, and the same fate will happen for Hoppscotches. So I was so keen. On couple of things, something that I call requirement docs, like the goals for this app. It never changes. It's kind of like the vision that you have, and the execution is something that you do with the technology. So while building an app, I used to build apps in React. I used to build apps in the good old framework like jQuery, the plain old JavaScript, that kind of stuff. I used to be from a 2007 tech stack grade, but when I choose the tech stack for Hoppscotch, I actually choose Vue.js for building Hoppscotch. And Hoppscotch was literally my first ever project in Vue.js. And by while building Hoppscotch, I learned the framework. I learned much more about TypeScript. Gradually, we migrated from JavaScript to TypeScript. So it's all about the execution. It's all about the vision that you have in your mind and the way you execute stuff. The ideas literally doesn't matter at all. It's all about the execution.
Yeah. Coming to your company, at what stage is your company right now?
So we are at a growth stage. Just after the uh, seed funding back in 2021, we have been recruiting, many amazing team players to our team. We are now a team of 10 engineers. I mean, we are literally engineers. Like we don't have a marketing guy, including me. I still write code 5 hours a day. Me and Andrew Bastion, who is our co-founder and CTO, we basically lead the team. We have other 8 engineers working full time on the app. We hope to increase our team strength to maybe 20 to 22 by Q1 next year, in next 3 to 4 months. So currently working on a couple of features which are very exciting and really helpful for the users. So
Coming to your like the funding part that you mentioned, the seed funding, and did you go for the Series A funding?
So actually, no. So we raised the seed round back in 2021. It was a $3 million round. We have participation from lot of interesting personnels from the tech industry. The fund was led by Oasis Capital, which is a VC firm based in SFUSA. They do have this inclination towards open source projects as a whole. So we haven't raised this series A yet, but we have some serious discussions going around. We hope to raise another round in the next 6 to 8 months. We have certain milestones to meet. For example, releasing the team collaborative, which was one of them. We have again some set of features lined up for production for the next couple of months, and once we meet those expectations, we will be going for a series A if it required.
How did you find your angel investors for the for Hopscotch?
So it's an old story. When I launched the project Hoppscotch back in 2019, it was on GitHub trending page, which is actually a page where GitHub basically shows the most active or most starred repositories from all around the world. Hoppscotch was on GitHub trending page for a straight week, for a 7 days straight week. And this is actually a page where most of the investors actually keep an eye out, like what are the most exciting projects out there, what are the new projects built by community, which is the most engaging projects and all. So starting from that week itself, from 2019, I started getting a lot of calls and a lot of inbound queries from top tier VC firms, not just from India but also from Europe, US, and all. Out of which Joseph Jacks, who is a founder and partner in Oasis Capital, who is actually the first guy who reached out to me, and it was a casual chat at first. Just want to know my future plans for the project, what's the intentions behind the project, that kind of stuff. So that just went by. I mean, it just happened back in 2019, and I used to work in another company full time when I was, developing the initial version of Hoppscotch. So I stayed there for again 1 year, and in 2020, after a year of the first commit, Joseph Jacks again reached out to me asking for any kind of help where I can continue working on the hopes coach full time for maybe a year or two down the line. So in my case, most of the angels and the VC firm led the round. approached me just because the project was so successful in the open source community, and literally we're generating a lot of inbounds and users, especially in the open source model. So yeah, but that not be the case for everyone. You have to reach out to VCs. You have to uh, you know reach out to angels and or for the initial funding, which is literally the most toughest part. But in my case, it was all inbound calls.
A normal thing that we see or someone who is looking for funding is ask is what is your revenue model actually.
Right,
So in case of Hopscotch, it's an open source project. The source code is available in GitHub.
right.
So how do you convince maybe someone a VC to actually fund you? So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's an interesting question, and it's again something most of the founders, especially from India or especially from Kerala, are not aware of, or something they wanna really learn about. So, the first question that I heard from a VC is, "How are you planning to make money out of it?" Like it's literally a bunch of uh, code files sitting in a GitHub repository, which can be accessed by public. So that was literally the first question that I heard from a couple of the VC firms that I approached. So for that question, my answer was very simple. uh, I will be focusing on recruiting as many users as possible in the first couple of years, which will essentially make Hoppscotch a essential dev tool within their tech stack. That was my intended goal for the first couple of years. So, if you consider project, if you consider the lifetime of a project, basically any VC funded project would take maybe 8 to 10 years for their maturity. Like if you take Figma for example, it's actually sold for multi-billion dollars. They literally had they literally never had a single dollar revenue for the first 4 years, but still they survived. This is the case of Figma, which has been sold to Adobe. So just consider this is the normal way of doing stuffs in the tech industry. Obviously it requires persistence, it requires a lot of effort from from your end as a CEO or the PM or the CTO of the product. So whether we do had a uh, revenue model, yes, we actually had a revenue model which was really based on GitHub sponsorships when I launched the project. So when I launched the project, I had a GitHub sponsorship account where I used to have a set of personnel sponsoring my work. That basically includes the co-founder of GitHub. We had CEO of GitHub. We had a lot of employees from Microsoft, GitHub, Reddit, Strappy. All the popular open source projects sponsoring me to work on the Hoppscotch project. So I consider that as a revenue in my initial days, and that was again strong constraint that you can put in front of your VCs. I mean, you can basically say that these famous personalities, these tech industry leaders are sponsoring me to work on this hopscotch full time. So why should I even need a paying users count, maybe 100 users, to prove that the work actually matters in the tech industry? So that was my case, but that should not be the general outlook. Try to acquire as many paying users as possible, but that doesn't necessarily mean that should be the reason why a VC should fund you, where your focus could be anything. So as a CEO, I try to focus acquire as many users as possible. We acquired 1 million plus users within the first 3 years of building Hoopscotch, and I guess that's a wonderful feat. We are working on an enterprise grade app which will come with a subscription model where users, especially teams and organization, will pay a fixed amount per person on a monthly basis. Pricing, monetization plans, it can be worked on at a later stage. First you need the product, first you need the users, who would use the product.
I'll just ask one more question and we'll wrap up for the day. So you are a you're a self-taught developer. You have taught yourself code and you have built this big company. How much is it worth right now?
Bro,
Valuation of Hoppscotch.
so the last valuation that we had was $30 million, but we are eyeing to $100 million by end of.
Yeah, that's that's great. So so you've built $100 million valuation company from scratch over the last 3 years, and you're a self-taught developer. So the question is, what are the must-have qualities of a self-taught developer? Or how did you? Maybe you can you can illustrate that using your own journey. Maybe
Right.
give some examples and yeah, yeah.
So first of all, this could be a personal opinion. I mean, being a developer, where I used to live in a place where I even had electricity 24/7. Like I used to have power cuts. I had internet connection in a 3G networks. I had a lot of limitations, but this could not be applicable to all others. But so take it as a personal opinion from my end. Few things that I learned is, one is the persistence. I mean, I have seen a lot of developers who started working on certain apps, certain tools, or software pieces, and after a while they basically jump from one tool to another, then started working on another tool. So if you have the conviction, if you have the determination that this app, or the software piece that you're writing will be used by hundreds of thousands of users, I want you guys to persist on that. I want you guys to be consistent with the maintenance of the project, and doesn't necessarily mean that you should expect a growth, or even the success part in a year, or in a 5 months, or in 10 months. Doesn't expect that. Don't do that. Instead, keep on working the project, be persistent, maintain the project consistently, and if you strongly believe the project can you know take to heights, it will happen one day. So being persistent is definitely one must have qualities for any self-taught developer. And the other part is basically building non-scalable stuffs. Like when you start with the app, just like Paul Graham would say, build non-scalable apps, or build non-scalable tools. If you want to build a scalable, or something that would be used by millions of users, it will literally make the entire software piece a lot of complexity, and it would introduce many more problems, which will be kind of like a burden for you to control. So working on stuffs which is not just simple but essential will give you the space to go a lot more miles, rather than working on something really complex, which will become sluggish and bloated as you develop. So two things: be persistent, be consistent on maintaining the software piece, and the second thing is work on simple things first. Don't overcomplicate. Don't work on things that would scale to millions first. Do things that do not scale. That's the two things.
Thank you so much for taking time out to listen to this episode. Hope you have found this podcast useful. Do drop a comment if you felt the same. Thank you for watching and see you guys in the next one.